So we have been having a lot of discussions about discussions as part of the wayfinding series, and as we begin to become more and more adept at some of the tools, although I don't know how, expertise is a relative term, right? Like you feel like I've really got this, and then then something comes along, and you're like, okay, let me work on that one, right? So. But discussions are one of those things that just for synchronous and asynchronous seems to be something that's on a lot of our minds right now. And so I think it's really exciting that we have the opportunity to have discussions about discussions, as one might say, right? To kind of think about like, how do we make these discussions rich? What's that? Some of us, Jill and I were actually having this conversation, what's the magic formula? I'm not sure that there is one exactly. So Jill, I'm so sorry. I don't know the answer to that, right? But as we kind of, continue to think about things that might help and tools and, that holistic approach also to supporting students and providing multiple ways for their voices to be heard as we think about things like the vision for success, right? When we think about, how do we support students in persisting? Because I don't know if you all have been having these conversations with your students a lot, but I definitely have, where my students are telling me like, I just really don't know if I belong in college. And they always say that, right? And thankfully they say that, because if they're not saying that, then that's kind of even more troubling, right? But then, in this kind of space, what do we do in order to help them to feel the power of their voices, and so that's something that we're thinking about a lot. And so we did last week, and I believe Julaine, I think you were there for our session last week, right? And Jill, for our session last week, where we were looking at it like a survey over the atmosphere. So it was like every single tool that you could possibly, probably not everyone, but like a lot of them, right? Google collaborations and like all these different tools, and it's like, whoa, there's a lot. And so we thought, well, okay, well, let's just kind of pare it down to maybe one at a time and kind of tackle that. And Sandy, were you there like recommending that? I feel like you were, but maybe not.
Just more time on one.
Yes, that's right. Yes. So you were there last week. And so, yeah, like, it's like, okay, well, let's take one at a time. And so we really, so it's helpful to get an overview, and then it's helpful to kind of then, parse them out a little. And so we'll see. I would recommend that you all get your web spaces ready, because I think we should all just, kind of look at this and then think about like how we might, as a community, like how we might utilize this really cool tool that I've been using for a while, and my colleagues actually introduced me to it. And I don't know if anyone has seen our 3CSN one, but this is an example of one that is very elaborate. So, and then I'll show you. So I'll start out with that, and then we'll kind of go backwards from there, so you don't get scared and think that you have to do something like this. Because someone looked at it and they said it keeps going and going and going. I'm like, yes, but again, we don't have to do this one. It doesn't have to be like that. Okay. But this is our community workshops and resources for online engagement and support. And so one of the things that let me make that smaller. Okay. Can everybody see that all right? It's okay. All right. Up. Keeps expanding, and I have this large monitor which makes everything very unpredictable. Okay, so in March, when we began and I've been thinking a lot about this because we just did our newsletter, which came out, so hopefully everyone got that in the email and have had a chance to look at it. It's pretty cool, we think, at least. But looking at the history and kind of like how we got here, and then thinking about March 18th and before that, and how we were just preparing for this, what we all thought was going to be that 2-week thing, right? Like, oh yeah, we're going to like really cram it in and figure it out, but it's only for 2 weeks. So we'll all survive for these 2 weeks. And then it's like, no, it's going to keep going. Then it's like, oh, July. And then, so now we just don't know. So we're looking at Chenille's background and we're trying to feel better about our current situation. And especially since we're all here together, which helps, right? It helps a lot. At least it helps me a lot for sure. So we were looking at, kind of things that people wanted. And so organizationally, when I was thinking about Padlet, I was like, okay, so, how do you make something that is going to be useful for people, and that will also kind of, how do you share resources? And so what we kind of settled on was using Padlet, and it really is a tremendous resource, but it did get really big. So it has everything one would probably be interested in seeing ever. I'm just kidding, really. Of course that can never be the case, right? But we really tried, and so we kept asking people like, oh, what else do you need? So we have like foster more of the court. For a while we were trying to put it in alphabetical order, and then it's like, you kind of, as a librarian, Aisha, you probably already know, it's like, how do you like organize information, right? So that was something that we were thinking about too. And that's something that with Padlet will be a consideration. So if you have, a desire to use Padlet after we, have this conversation and kind of start looking at it, then we can think about like what would be the best way. And so I'll show you a couple different formats. Well, actually there are several formats that you can use. I personally like this one. It's called Shelf, because you get to put headers, and then you have a lot of different options that you can use. So one thing that I do need to tell you at this moment is that in order to, and this happens with the students and everybody else, but in order to scroll, you have to go into the section and then scroll down. Otherwise, if you try to scroll down from like here, nothing will occur, because each one has its own thing. So they're all scrollable this way, so they come, in a linear manner. And then you can add a new item, and then you also can do some liking if there's something that you find, really cool or, interesting, and your students can do this too. So this is something that you can think about. Okay. So I think I saw something in the chat, so I just want to make sure to be attentive to that. Iris, did you see what's in there?
Someone's just asking to get more info on Padlet, and that's what you're doing now.
Yes, that is what we are doing. Yep, that's right. Okay, so this is a Padlet, a particular one, right? So this is, again, something that we thought about. How do we organize information in a way that people can kind of scroll through? There are a lot of Facebook groups like Pandemic Pedagogy. So it's like, should we do it that way? How do you organize information? And so again, this is one way, but in terms of discussion, if you have like items, then how do we use this as a tool, not just for storage, right? Or for, that kind of interaction where you're reading, but actually making it into an interactive space. And that's, what we're here to talk about today. So let me go back to the dashboard. And they have fun names like My Shiny Padlet and My Stellar Padlet. So, and they give you this information, and they have like really friendly messages. So that's kind of nice. And we have different kinds. So my students, I actually have, one of the things that I've used it for, just before we kind of move into the, the logistics, I personally have used it for my students to upload their e-portfolios. And then from there, from the e-portfolio, they're able to then comment on each other's work. And so they can go ahead and use it as a space where they can interact, but it's also visual. And we know that where many of them are, our Instagram, very, very visual. in terms of, you know, just what they're used to. And so this is a nice space for that. And I found that it is a good space using it for the first time and using it in a few different ways. So I've used it also with our ePortfolio. If anyone's interested, we're still able to accept some registrations. But for our ePortfolios lab, and so design lab, and so we've here at 3CSN, and so we've been able to have folks give a peer review inside of this space. So, you know, giving feedback and discussing in a peer review fashion together. So that's a cool, and I would love to show this to you, but it is my current students, and they haven't given permission, so I don't want to do that. But I did. We did have a session recently here in 3CSN, and folks answered a question. So the question was, what's your why? State your core value and the outcome, and post a visual image to capture this. And so you can use it as this kind of discussion. I thought this was mine, so I was there in the session, and so mine was about interdependence, and community outcome was to have this, you know, thing. And then I was able to create a visual image that went with it. And I think it was a really cool exercise. And so this is something that you can do, is to actually, you know, pose a question. However, given the fact that you can only have 3 Padlets, this is a piece of information to write down. So you can only have 3 at a time. So you either would have to delete this each time and make a new one, or you could make each of these into a question. Like if you were doing groups or, you know, something like that, then again, this is where Aisha's brain is going to be helpful for us, right? You know, as a librarian, because I have so much respect for librarians. But I'm a super fan. But as we think about, like, you know, how do you engage in that work with the limit of, I only have 3 Padlets. That's my option. So, you know, kind of thinking about that is something I think that we'll want to think about and speak about. Okay, so any questions about this part? Yes, Julaine, you're actually raising your hand physically. I love that.
So when you say I only have 3 Padlets, that means like this blue, you know, canvas, this blue palette that I'm seeing. So like you can do it in 3 of your classes at once, but you can't have them lingering.
That's right.
Account, right.
Yeah. So when we go to Padlet, we can make 3.
Thanks.
You can be connected to other people's Padlets. So for instance, this one is a Padlet that I created, and you can tell by these the color of this little icon here. So these are my account, and you can change your logo. We have one for 3CSN, but I'm also connected to that one because I have liked it. So they show up here. And that's the same with Beth Gillis-Smith and her colleague Tracy Tenenbaum, are Tenenhouse, are both also here. And then this is my best friend and collaborator. We did a workshop, and our resource page is here as well. So and these are the 2. So I have 1, 2, 3. So in order to, I had to actually delete another one that I had on here in order to add these, because I kind of want to show you some things that we could do if you were interested. Now I do see a question from Chenille that says, are we to scroll down to the end of the left column, click before selecting any of the websites listed? I think your question, tell me if I'm answering this correctly. And please ignore any sounds of my cats going crazy in this room. Okay, so the joy of cats. Okay, so you scroll here on the right, and it's a little hard to see, but you have to scroll on each of them. So that's how it works. Is that helping to answer the question?
So you have to scroll down on each one of them, whichever one you're selecting.
Yes, Yes, and
Oh,
that's
yeah,
hard for people. That's hard for people to recognize because, you know,
Yeah,
so it's helpful. Like you can put a little note here, or you can
okay.
put a note up here that kind of, you know, directs people that they need to, you know, they need to scroll. They'll probably figure it out because I did. Because I was like, why is it not moving?
Okay.
And then I
And
realized, oh, well, that makes sense.
one other quick question.
Yes.
Are any of these Padlet selections for beginners who know very little or who are very little digitally savvy? Because
Yes,
these,
that's why I said I'm showing you the scary one first.
because my
Okay, I'm
students
showing
wouldn't
you
be
the
able to
scary
do
one
any
first.
of that. My students wouldn't be able to do any of that you've just
Yeah.
shown so far.
Yeah. No, we're going to the scary one first, and then we're going to go backwards. Okay, so yes, definitely. So we'll take a look at this, and then you can decide if this is something that you would like to do, or, you know, how you might use it, or, you know, how we can kind of use it as a way. In 3CSN, we really love this phrase that we got from Zaretta Hammond, who wrote Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain. And Zaretta Hammond talks about the productive struggle. And so we think that this is a really important concept when we're thinking about our students, because a lot of times, like, you know, it is true that we have to find that balance, right? You know, on the one hand, yes, I'm talking about the free version. Yes. But on the one hand, you know, we definitely don't want to overwhelm our students right now, especially we have to strike that balance. But we also, this is something that I genuinely experienced with my students last semester. I thought, oh my goodness, like I cannot give them the e-portfolio. That was my thing. I was like, I can't give them a portfolio at the end of the semester. They're going to implode. You know, I was like, it's going to be too much and all this stuff. And then the student said, oh, we're not going to get to do that cool thing because they saw Iris's. Say hi, Iris. I'm so sorry. I just realized at this moment that I did not allow you to introduce yourself. Would you like to take a second?
Sure. Hi, my name is Iris, and I'm here to help facilitate, take notes, and help give a student perspective on anything Ms. Keelan talks about.
Yes, she kind of runs the show, basically. I'm just here in awe of her. But anyway, so they saw Iris's e-portfolio and they were just like, oh, can we please do that too? So there's a balance, but, you know, again, we have to, because I personally, like, I'm like, let the students lead. They know more than I do. And I really, like, overall, like, usually try even not to know sometimes as much as they do, just so that they, you know, I don't find that, you know, kind of like, I want to tell them like, no, do it this way. So yeah, so we'll see what you think. But here is the shiny Padlet, which is just the basic version. So what you do is when you go in here, you just simply choose make a Padlet. You can decide which kind you want. So you might decide, and let me go ahead and delete one of these Padlets, probably the shiny one, so that I can actually make a Padlet right now with you. So I would say, if you'd like, Iris, would you mind popping the Padlet website into, all right. It's nice because it tells you, like, it makes sure that you're not actually deleting this on accident. So that's helpful. Would you mind putting the Padlet? Thank you. Okay. So that's our Padlet. And if you could put the Padlet website in the chat, that would be helpful. I would like for you to just kind of try it out with me and see what you think. You know, oh, thank you. Perfect. Okay. So you just click on make a Padlet. You can also join someone else's Padlet. So if you decide, you know what, I'm not ready, but I would like to join, you know, just to look at something, you can join a Padlet. You can also see other people's galleries. And again, this is all the free one. We have been able to make this giant tome out of, you know, just the free version. So there, I don't believe there's a limit on how many things you can, how many columns you can put on it. And what's cool about it also is that you can also pull another Padlet into it. So if I decide that I want to pull another Padlet in here, I can go ahead and pull in another Padlet right here. So I can link to one of my other Padlets as well. So there are a lot of options, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So if we click on make a Padlet ourselves, and again, we don't need to spend money because none of us, you know, have all that extra expendable income right now anyway. But we have, there's a wall version. So it has like this kind of brick-like layout. There's one that's like scatter group and connect content. So there are ways that, for instance, if you were doing concept mapping, this might be a useful one, you know, to have students, you know, kind of like think about how they might do things. There's a stream, there's a grid, and this is the one that I really like, the shelf. There's a timeline, there's a map, so depending on your subject. There's a communicate in a chat-like environment. I haven't used this one before, but let's take a look at this. So let's see. So there's a way to communicate in a chat-like environment. So I can say something. Okay. And then Iris can reply to me. And I can decide on what I want to do here. So, you know, kind of having these communications, kind of like Jamboard. I don't know if anyone's seen Jamboard, but it's, you know, it seems like it's that kind of environment. So that might be something. But for me, like the shelf version seems to work the best just because it has, oh, wow. Well, this is colorful. This might be too much for your students' eyes. I don't know. And so when we think about like having the different columns, so if I wanted to, for instance, let me actually show you one that our colleague Lars used also. Oh, it's not under this one. Okay, let me leave these here and then I'm gonna go, you're gonna see all my tabs and be horrified. Okay. Let me see. Get it. All right, well, I don't think it's going to be easy for me to get that, so I will share it with you if needed, but one of our colleagues actually made a Padlet that was similar to this, but they used it for like a discussion book group. And so this is another option that you might have is for discussions, is to think about having, okay, Sandy, yes, I will talk about that in just a second because that's a very important question. So Sandy asked, so if you only get 3, do you erase everything and choose a new format if you want something other than shelf or discussion? Sandy, are you asking about inside of one class or are you talking about?
I don't know what I'm asking because I don't know this. So if it's, but yeah, you said you only get 3 and you're showing all of these different options. So if I used a discussion in one class, the discussion board like you showed, and so for another class, I wanted to use shelf, for example, to do a different kind of activity, would I erase everything from the discussion and go back and start over now with a shelf?
Okay, well, in terms of problem solving, I would say that there is a workaround which I personally employ, which is, remember I just said, let me go into my other email account. There is a reason for that, right? Yes, Julian, you know where I'm going with this. You have a lot of email addresses and guess what? You can make more. Okay, now this is a terrifying environment if you're thinking about, you know, like, okay, I'm gonna keep adding more email addresses and then you're gonna have the situation that I just had, which is like, which one was it under, you know? But you can kind of link them into the other one as well. So I would say that you might wanna have you know, maybe like an email address that's connected to that particular class that you might use with your students. And then you can just have that Padlet be attached to that class, right? And so you can have 3 with that one. So for this semester, maybe, you know, like having those 3 Padlets might be acceptable. And there might be situations where you could delete stuff, right? You could delete that whole Padlet because you're like, I'm done. But if you're doing something like formative assessment, you know, or you're kind of collecting data, or you want to see their progress over time, then clearly you're not going to want to do that. So, you know, but it's a fun and interactive space, and I personally like it. I think that my colleagues like it. Iris, you've used this before, Padlet? Okay, tell us what you think about it.
I haven't yet used it in a classroom, but I do remember when we used it in our e-portfolio.
Yes,
series.
That's right.
It was like really nice to be able to interact and because what we did was they posted their e-portfolio like website, and then everyone would take a look, and then everyone would comment under that post and like give them helpful criticism. And I thought that was like really beautiful to see. And like I was able to get whatever criticism that I got or that we got for our Google sites, and that was like really pretty because it's all under one page.
So we did it this way. So we put the e-portfolio, this is our, you know, the site, and then we put the thank you so much. That was really helpful. And then we actually had, you know, people gave feedback here. So that was a cool kind of discussion element. And then we're actually able to also add readings and articles that people, and you can crowdsource it. So the students or participants in this situation can add as well. So this is a nice tool that has a lot of different, you know, and it's nice because then you can get pretty detailed. As you can see, some of these are pretty detailed. So it gives you a lot of options. And like I said, it'll keep going and going across the page. You know, it's just that the students need to be aware that there's a lot going on here. Okay, so I'm just going to check that chat and make sure. Okay. All right, so I think we're on track. Did anyone have any questions about this part? How does this interact with Canvas? Okay, Julian, you were reading my mind again. Okay. So, you know, with Canvas, here's the thing. So you can put it in here. So you can add anything inside of Canvas, right? But the issue is that it's an external tool, and therefore it's not going to be as easy to grade. So if we're thinking about the quick situation, then we want to make sure that we're recognizing that, you know, that this might be a better kind of like here's a workaround. And this is where I start getting creative, right? I'm like, okay, I want my students to do this thing, but I also don't have, you know, time to go in and like painstakingly look at stuff. So I'm just like, okay, you could have them send you a screenshot of what they did. You could have them, you know, just post that, right? You could have them just post, like simply post the thing. Because I've had the same thing happen with discussions. Recently, I just had my students do something with Google Docs, and somehow I'm locked out of those collaborations. And so it's kind of like, okay, well, it's great that they were able to work with each other on this thing, but I can't really, you know, and then you have to make a decision as an educator, like, you know, if they're already like sharing that they've done these things, like, is there enough trust there that you can say, you know what, like I 100% believe that you did your best on this thing, and I'm just going to give you the points for that, right? And so we have to think about that. But I think that there are creative ways to give the students some accountability in the process of letting you know that they have done this thing, right? So they could, you know, they could just like screenshot it, or, and that also gives them a tool. Does that, Iris, does that sound like something that wouldn't be too much extra?
No, I feel like it's just like a small added step if I'm just sending a screenshot of what I made, or if I'm just like posting it. It's really easy to do.
Yeah, so I think, and it also gives you a skill, right? You know, when you think about like, oh, I know, now I know how to make these screenshots, and I can share, you know, share that inside of the, we can give them a little, you know, tiny mini tutorial, super tiny one, you know, things like that. Okay, so I'm seeing another question here, and then we're actually going to get into the real, okay. Could you assign small groups a topic and then they would each have a place on the Padlet to add their work? Yes. Okay. So the answer is yes, and the answer is also yes, but, or yes, and. Okay. And so you can definitely give the students a group. And this is something that I got pretty excited because I actually did that with a Google slide. So with my students, I had them each do on a Google Doc, I had them do a small group together, and they were doing they shared, we're doing a what is art. It's kind of a what is art adjacent project where they're talking about like, what does art do? And so they brought in some work of art that really like is impactful to them, that they love. And then I had them kind of come together to think about, you know, what are they noticing in terms of common themes between their works. And so it was a little bit experimental in this space of like, you know, breakout rooms and the technology and all that kind of stuff, you know, and screen sharing sometimes gets a little funky. But they then, and I do Synchronous once a week, and they have an optional community hour on Wednesdays that they come to. We're not allowed on our campus to have fully asynchronous, so that's something different. But I had each of them, you know, do something inside of the slides. I've seen people do some really great things, and I shared a resource in the last session about that. But I think that something similar could happen inside of Padlet, which is that, you know, we could, you know, if we made the Padlet, then we could name the first column like group A, right? And then you could put the question here, right? So the question could be like group A, and, you know, what is art? Okay. And so you could, you know, kind of decide, or let's say not just, that's pretty vague, but like I gave some different options this last week. It was, actually, it was just this week. So it's just a few days, it just, you know, yesterday, really. But one of the things that I was asking them was about who decides. And then they could, you know, kind of work on that, and they could have group B. So maybe, you know, kind of thinking about this idea about, you know, what is the role? And then many of my students shared with me that they haven't been to a museum since they were in first grade, which was very interesting to me. I was like, oh, wow, you know, your tours are no longer. Okay, so Sandy asked, do you teach students how to use it during a synchronous class? Yes, but you can also do, you know, we have Canvas Studio right now. So Canvas Studio, those short videos are very useful. And honestly, if they're not doing it inside of classes, we don't have a lot of time, right? We have like an hour and 15 minutes, that's 75 minutes to do every single thing once a week. Oh my God, so that is not enough time, right? You know, especially, it's never enough time. Like I tell my students all the time, like we could talk for like years about this stuff. You know, we're just like, you know, it's just like a little bite, a little snack, You know, it's not. So, you know, so how do we handle that? And one of the ways that I do that, you know, personally, I get kind of my workaround is, you know, to start doing these like little videos, which our coordinator for the program does a lot. She's much better at it than I am. I hate seeing myself on video so much, and I spend so much time on video. I just can't watch it. I'm like, what's going on with my mouth? Like every single time, I'm like, oh my goodness, like I look like I'm like, I don't know, it's weird. Okay, so that's that. All right, so in order to set this up, like let's say that I just do not like this background and I'm just wondering to myself, you know, I don't like it, I want something different. So I can go in here and these are all of the options. So we can change the format. So if you don't like it anymore, you can change the format. You're welcome, Becky. So you can change it. You can decide, you know what, I kind of like the idea of this other thing now, and so I'm going to move it around, and then you can move it back. But some things may not stay with it, so you know, just be cautious about that. You can invite people into it, so you can add whomever you like. And you can change the privacy. So you can decide on what visitors can do. So this is where you kind of avoid those trolls. You can also make it secret. You can keep it hidden from the public, and you can give it, you can go ahead and change, and you can put a password in here. So my students for this semester, there is a password that's attached to theirs, and I put it inside of Canvas, and they're able to find it there. You can have, you know, no access, it's only for you. I can imagine, you know, if you wanted to maybe use it as a journal or something, like, you know, that's, I mean, that is an option, right? You could have students even use something like this. I mean, we do e-portfolios and blogging, but students could actually use this as their journal. You know, they could decide, you know what, I want to kind of accumulate and, you know, think about that, or it could be an option that they have for journals and classes. You could have it be public. So let the whole world see this Padlet and its lovely colors here. Okay. So then you decide on the visitor permission. So if you all are following along, you can take a look on yours. You can decide if they can only read posts, if they can write, or if they can edit. Okay. And this has the differences between the three, so you can take a look at that as well. Wow, I really did not think that Padlet would take this much time. I'm pretty like, you all were right. Yes, I think we do need 1 hour for each one of these. Okay, is there a default for those permissions? I believe it's view. Here it says visitor permissions can write. So I guess the default is, let's try, keep working. I don't want to do that. Okay. So if I do the password, then it's that way. Okay, but let's see what the privacy is. It says visitors can write. So I think that the default is that visitors can write so that they can actually type, you know, they can go in here. And if I share this with you all, so I can go ahead and copy the link to the clipboard. And this is something that I absolutely love doing, always putting things in the chat, as those of you who know me know. Okay, so so the Padlet here, unfortunately, my PowerPoint for my Google Slides were not good enough for me to share anything with you today. So I'm not going to do that today, but I will, next time Iris and I do this, Iris will be taking more of a lead. She is supervising me right now, but she'll let me know how I did at the end of this. But next time she'll be taking more of a lead. So then, you know, we'll have a little bit more of a slide, so you can come and see if it's better the second time. Okay. You can also embed in your blog or website. So this is where you could actually embed this inside of Canvas, which is a nice feature. So if I decide that I want to do that, I can just, you know, copy this, and then I can go into Canvas. I'll go into my other site so I'll go into my test site, which I didn't know I could have. So I was really excited when I finally got this. I was like, oh, yes. And if you don't have one, ask your DE coordinator because it is so magical. Definitely a good thing. Okay, so let me get into my assignments here. Oh, it's so slow. Okay. This is actually a template that is from Josh Miller from our Canvas series. So I pulled it in. Oh, don't do that. Okay, let's see. Okay, so let's see what this looks like. All right, I'm going to do this now. Thank you for helping me because I actually need to do this. I didn't even know about the embed. I learned something too. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Okay, can students simultaneously work on the same column? I believe so. How about if we try it out? Let's try. Okay, so it says Padlet updated elsewhere. So let's see. All right. So they just come in. Yeah, they just come in. So it's kind of nice. This is something that I love about collaborative tools. So this would be a great tool also. I'm just, still thinking about all of the possibilities, and you all probably have some ideas that I don't have yet. Yes, so they just click on plus in the comment. Yes, that's right. And they can also, they can add another column here as well. I don't think that we have we can do a full screen situation. There's an you can archive it as well. So maybe that would be helpful, like to archive it. That might be something. So we can clear all the posts if we want to. Let's not do that. How long does it take to create a Padlet for students? Well, Chanel, that's a good question. And I think the answer, unfortunately, is it depends. So that might mean that, it really just does depend on what you're trying to accomplish. And so you want to think about backwards designing it in a way that it's helping you to meet your goals, right? So it could be that, and it's very easily updatable. But you want to be really deliberate about how you're doing it because actually, Iris, did you want to speak? I know you've mentioned this before about what happens when people like throw a new technology at you just indeterminately.
Yeah, so I think for students, it's if you just don't introduce it to them, or if you just lightly touch upon the subject and then have them do it, it's a lot more like they work it up in their heads and they think it's such like a big thing. And then once they actually go into it and try it and do it, it's a lot simpler than they thought. Padlet is really simple. If you click the link, you can just add anything by commenting. It's so simple, but like you work it up in your head and you just think, oh, it's so hard. It looks much harder than she showed us because she only showed us for like 3 seconds or like a minute or like half the class. But if you go through it like calmly or show them for like a period of the class, they'll definitely understand. It'll be like stuck in their head, so they won't work it up as such a big deal.
Okay, thank you so much. yeah, so I think what one of the things that Iris, you know, is sharing is that, you know, we really have to be intentional. It has to have a purpose, right? And I really try with my students, I always tell them, you know, everything that we're doing in this class has a purpose. And if it doesn't make sense to you, like what that purpose is, then let's talk about it, right? You know, so, you know, kind of thinking about like how they might, one second, I'm trying to do two things at one time. It's not working very well. Okay. All right, so here we go. So this is the magical item. Okay, so if you want them to comment on the post, you need to scroll down. You can change your font a little bit. I wouldn't recommend that too much because of accessibility. I also probably would change the wallpaper a little, right? You know, this is a little bit bright for people who might have, you know, have issues with contrast. So maybe, well, that's very blasé, but I don't know. What do we like? You can also put in your own wallpaper. So you can search images, you can upload, you can take a photo. I have a scene from the Carters, one of the Carters videos that I don't want to say on the camera. So that is a lovely image that I like in the background because it's about art galleries and things like that. So it kind of gives that gallery feeling. So you can kind of, you know, put that. Okay, so Padlet for annotating a document. That's an interesting question. I think that I agree with Aisha. Is that the correct pronunciation of your name?
Aisha?
Aisha, I'm so sorry. Okay. I've been saying it wrong the whole time and I was like, I should have just asked you in the beginning. Okay. So I'd like to be able to set a document in the background and then have them comment on the document in little Padlet notes. Okay. So that actually, yeah, Google Doc, but I really think that honestly, I think that you're going to want Jamboard. Yeah, you're going to want Jamboard, although Jamboard can apparently, and I learned this from a colleague, someone can like come in and erase the whole thing and there's no way to get it back. So I'm not a fan of that because I think it's easy to make a mistake. You know, I mean, it's just like you're just clicking on stuff, right? You know, so yeah, I think in terms of annotating with the sticker, yeah, Jamboards are small. So I think you could, like, if you, yeah, you, well, you know what? Yes, you could maybe with those little notes. I'll get back to you, Julaine. I'm gonna take a look at this and see. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna take a look at this and see, because Jamboard might not be the answer, but I'm trying to think. Iris, can you think of anything, or anybody else can think of anything that would be super useful with the little sticky notes? It's like we want a hybrid. We want Jamboard to marry Padlet and have a lovely baby that like could then like live in this space. All right, well, this is so, and then you can decide, like you can have these things, you can blur it out, and you know, you can do different things here. But oh, hypothesis. Okay, we're gonna look into that, Becky, thank you. Yes, so yeah, the ADA stuff, we want to think about that, and you know, making sure that we have contrast and all of that. So you know, there are just different ways to think about having students interact. And sometimes, you know, we might think, oh, we're making something so great, but then it's like, oh, wait a minute, you know, that's probably not the best situation. So let's make I guess, I don't know. They really have some interesting ones here. Okay. This one would actually make me dizzy. I think there were, you know, you don't want to like give anyone a seizure either. Okay, so we'll do a little something. Okay. All right, so you can play around with it, and the students, you can also have the students vote. One of the features that I really like, you can also have display the author name above each post. So this will help you because they can actually have like their name above it here. Okay, so it comes up. All right, so I think I just answered your question, okay, because you can have them have their name up here. It just needs to make sure. So you just want to make sure to do that. I accidentally answered your question. Okay. All right, so then here I like having the new posts occur at the top so that you can see the newest ones, and that helps with grading and things like that as well, especially if you have things embedded in your Canvas. You can allow them, and I don't know how you all feel about this. We have reactions, and you can grade, star, upvote, or like posts. So I'm kind of like torn about that. I feel like sometimes it becomes a popularity contest, or it's like the person who posts first gets all of the love, and the others, students that come later. Unfortunately, I did a session, I did a course, I did our Equity 1 and 2 course in the summer, and I was like the last person because I was very, very busy. And so I was like, okay, but I'm like, I'm still here. I'm just in here. No one's answering me, but it was okay. It was good. It was still wonderful to be there. And there was a nice person who came by and, gave me some nice feedback. So, but we can think about that, and I'd be interested to hear what you all think about. I don't know, Iris, what do you think about the liking posts and things like that? You've been in these classes with me for discussions.
Yeah, definitely the people who comment first or are at the top, they get the most replies, or they get the most interaction with other people, because once you're late, unless everybody else is late, they're not going to comment on your post.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I agree with Aisha and with Iris about the Google Docs comment feature being good for annotation. And we do that also kind of like a gallery walk. So you can have, and you can, what I do like about that, thank you, Aisha. I love community, but it's also nice because you can actually tag the person in it, and they'll get an email. So that's a nice, you can tag them, and then they'll get an email, which is really cool because then they know that you have commented on it. So that's one of the things that I do with my students, is do that kind of discussion so that there is an interactive quality, and then they get an email, and then they'll like kind of message you back, and it becomes almost like a text message, which is cool. So that is also reminding me that we should probably, as part of this discussion, we might want to look at that Pronto tool as well, thinking about like how we might use, some of these other technologies and tools. So those are the main, these are the main things. You can require a moderator to approve. So this is another way to kind of check who's posted by you kind of deciding, oh, well, let me just go ahead and require the moderator to approve. You can replace bad words with nice emojis. Hilarious. Okay. And then you can, of course, change the title and change the description, and you can have your customized icon if you like. I personally like, cats, but maybe I'm going to have a mouse here. Okay, so you can add, or you can decide that you don't want that. So, okay. So those are, those are the main kind of, elements of this. So just thinking about like, I guess we could use the last couple minutes to think about together, what are some uses for it? What do you think that the limitations might be?
So I'll say, just based on, and I haven't used Padlet yet, this is Aisha, but I mean, we talked about organization. I think that's the big thing, because if I was going to use this, it would definitely be in like a synchronous session for some activities or something where they're in breakout rooms and I want to track progress. Mm-hmm. And then also use this kind of as a note-taking device, right? So when we actually summarize and review what we've learned, this is a good way to keep track of what people have written and what their ideas were from each group, but it would have to be hyper organized, one, so that they wouldn't get lost in the digital sphere, which we know happens a lot with Google Docs.
Yeah.
Big old doc, or it's too many links if you do separate documents. So I think I see this as a possibility with that, but I'd have to be really specific. And I like the idea you said about having kind of instructions at the top with group assignments, and then maybe having some exercises listed per column, or something that would be really clear as to where they're supposed to be putting text and who is supposed to be doing what. I think as we know with activities, that's kind of key as to what role people are going to play. So I think if that's clear, this has the potential to really help with that, where Google Docs kind of fails us as a big old textual mess at the end of an activity.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, because when we're thinking about Google Docs, and I love Google Docs, it is like tattooed in my heart. I love Google Docs a lot. However, I do agree that we end up having a lot of them, and so what you all are reminding me is that another possibility is thinking about, like, this could be a space almost like an e-portfolio, a very small version of it, right? As the students track their progress, and then the peer review can happen in here. They can, upload all of their documents in here. And so this can really be a visual space for them to, in a very simple way, because I know one of you was talking, Chanel, was it you who was saying that, you're concerned about the students, right?
Yes.
And so when we think about, like, note taking, and, I know that's not the main topic of this particular discussion, but, just to kind of like look at the breadth of it, there are a lot of organizational possibilities here. And there's also a space, like, you could assign the questions, or each student could have their own of these, right? And they could also upload that as, like, okay, I've done this thing, right? And I've responded to a couple of other students' things. Or they could put the Padlet into the discussion. Mind blown. Okay, they could put it into your Canvas discussion, and therefore, just like they would a Google Doc, because as Aisha is saying, like, sometimes those Google Docs get unwieldy. So if we have something like a Padlet, each student has their own Padlet, then they could just upload that and do their 2 posts on each other's stuff. They wouldn't necessarily have to post in here. And that way they could, that could be another possibility. So, I mean, I think that there are areas, I don't, again, think that Canvas has a way to grade it in the speed grader, but I could be wrong. So I will look into that as well. And we can all look in and, check back. But we are at the hour. I can't believe it. We actually talked about Padlet for an hour. Wow. Okay, so I was like, uh-oh, like we're not gonna have enough to say. So any last questions or thoughts? Okay, so I see Chanel, don't think Padlet is for beginning students who are not digitally savvy. Students with low technology savvy would get lost trying to facilitate all the necessary clicks. It's a tad much to remember all the clicks to design. Create the Padlet for beginner students to post discussions, group activities. Iris, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, Padlet is also available on iPhones, if I'm sure. It's really simple to use, and it uses very, like, from its appearance, it doesn't use much I want to say bandwidth.
Oh, bandwidth?
Yeah.
Wait, for the graphics heavy stuff. Yeah, that's true.
It doesn't use much bandwidth, so I would say it's really simple to use. So for any students that aren't tech savvy, it would be as easy as figuring out a new gaming app.
So the other thing I wanted to share with you just as a moment, because I didn't get to show, start with small tasks maybe, or, as an option, that's another thing. But you can upload to it. So you can upload a document, you can pick a file, you can link to something, to a website. you can link videos and images, GIFs or GIFs, depending on which side of the board you go on that one. You can put audio in here, so that could be an option to put an audio file. Bye, Chenille. Take good care. Thanks for coming and bringing your beautiful image with us.
Thank you also for all of the information.
Yeah. Well, we'll be interested to see like what, you know, we'll be having another session next week. So which discussion tool would you all be interested in seeing? Do we want to do Google Doc stuff with the annotations and practicing that? What sounds interesting? Jamboard, probably not. Okay, so collaborations. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's always a popular one. So maybe we can do, we'll do collaborations next week. Okay. Okay, yeah, it is. Yeah, there's a little bit, and Iris is pro at that. All right, bye-bye. Thank you so much.